If you've ever thought no one really understands what you're dealing with, then this episode's for you. I'm talking today with autism advocate Mandy Pinkley about finding the kind of community where you and your child feels understood, supported, and not judged. If you've been feeling alone in this, then I promise you're not. And this episode will remind you of that, so stay tuned. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Autism Family Resource Podcast. We provide guidance and insights for parenting neurodivergent children. I'm your host, Brian Keene from Pure Hearts Therapy. And today we're talking about something every parent needs. That's community. Our guest is back again today, Mandy Pinkley, and she's back to talk about the power of a connection, why finding your people makes such a difference, and how support groups and shared spaces can help family move from isolation to hope. Welcome back, Mandy.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's get this thing started by sharing a little bit about how community or connection played a role in your journey, in your life.
It is so important to feel authentic and to be yourself. And I don't know if we had touched on it before, is how I was told that if I was public about being autistic, it would ruin my career. And that was from people the closest to me. And so when I was able to find people that also had autism and were thriving or even public about it, it really gave me strength. And that community was so important. Like being in a room, I would have with everyone that had autism. It was such a different experience. I never thought that I thought I just like a cliche, but it really does help realizing it's okay to be myself. It's not a shame just because no one around me in my area is doesn't mean that it's some like oddity or something that's different.
That sounds tough just to hear that. How did that feel? Like when you would hear like, hey, if you say you're autistic, it ruin your career. How did that feel?
It was devastating. Like it felt like I had to hide and fit in and really push myself really hard to fit into other people's ideas. And I came to the realization that even when I tried to be the smallest I could and not get in anyone's way, I still got bullied. People still don't like you. It doesn't matter. And so I said, being open and honest with others and having that like heart on your sleeve, the only negative thing I can see from a philosophical standpoint is other people judging me in some aspect. And I said, that's not a good enough reason for me not to be myself.
Mm, that's huge. So it sounds like even in this journey, you finding yourself, finding your community is almost it build confidence, right? You just like, hey, I'm okay with who I am, and it doesn't matter. You're not going to please anybody.
And I know that I have also felt confidence through like media. Like there was this show called Centaur World, and it's like an animated cartoon where it talks about like trauma, and it's with these unicorns and centaurs, but it gets into really deep concepts, and it helps me work through some things in a more digestible way, and it gave me confidence. Like there was like a song like Who Is She? You can really relate to media like that. And there was this like Disney songs, like there's Encanto, and I really resonated with the What Else Can I Do song. And that's really when I opened my shell. I don't have to be perfect. And I really did relate to that.
Mm, thanks for sharing that. You kind of had an experience where you're kind of like shut down, where it's like, don't be yourself. And then you were able to feel more empowered to be yourself. What did that look like? Maybe some of those first experiences of you just feeling like, hey, I could be myself and I could be proud of who I am.
The latest one is the huge anime called One Piece, and it's so deep and inspiring. And it does. It says to push for yourself and be your dreams. And if you lose yourself along the way or whatever, at least you're doing your dreams. So it's really kept me on that path. And also watching the same shows over and over again helps regulate your nervous system.
Mm.
So I've really gotten used to that. But it helps, like in the earlier days, it helped me find my voice when I didn't have it. Hearing other characters have that confidently. And I just personally resonated mostly to more like animated characters in that sense for motivation.
That is so cool. I love that. It's really unique. But then again, we all kind of do in our own ways. Like some people are like, I love Superman. I want to be like Superman or Black Panther, whoever it might be. But yeah, I love that analogy. Thanks for sharing that in your experience. This is kind of related. Since a lot of parents are listening, how do you feel like parents can create community for their child? Because we're going to talk about how they can create community for themselves as families. But how do you think they can start build that community for their child, and how early do you think they could start doing that?
It's never too early to start trying to find community. Like, for example, for the loss of grief, there's anticipatory grief groups there. So you can even like be prepared for something. I mean, obviously that's different, but like the concept. And I know it may be like cheesy, but finding people that are going through something similar or anything, just someone you can feel safe with and be able to talk through everything. And, you may have like someone you can only talk to about one thing, and that's fine. And just being okay with that. I think a big thing also is people like, for example, with autism, it sometimes is, genetic, and a lot of parents may have it and they never get diagnosed. So they may struggle and maybe trying to get diagnosed and find their community too,
Mm.
because they may find similarities. But I think a lot of people feel alone. And this whole digital age has opened up so many barriers to finding inclusion. And there's so many like demographics that have found connection for like the first time online.
Wow, that's there's a couple things that stood out to me right there. Is like one is the connection through digital. Like there's a positive and negatives to digital, but we can't ignore some of those positives that come out of that for you reach people who maybe you may not have been able to reach one way or another, or to have these groups that are available online. I just see that in my own life, just finding little groups here and there through, apps and platforms and stuff like that. And yeah, I agree. What you said about the parents. A lot of parents I work with, like they're like, they almost come to realization during therapy sessions every once in a while. They're like, "Oh yeah, my son, he hates um these smells, and he hates, the strong smells." And then they're like, "Yeah, I hate that too." So they still start to see some of those connections there. Um but yeah, as you mentioned, the isolation, that's where we're kind of going towards. Why do you think so many parents and caregivers feel isolated even though they're surrounded by people? And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit already.
Going into isolation is honestly my biggest fear. So I completely resonate with anyone who feels that feeling in any sense. And sometimes there's not a clear answer of how to make that feeling go away, but you can try. Or, just really having that talk with yourself. What would make me feel better for this? Because it may look differently. Maybe someone would like to go participate at a bake sale to raise funds for a certain field trip for everyone, but other parents would rather just, have a what phone call or just a text. Everyone's different in that regard. Like a lot of people like in person, like group meetings to look for community, and there's people who like online. And I think that a big thing people need to talk about is there needs to be a leader to start these things happening in the community. Like, a lot of people keep to themselves, and we all feel this way, that we're alone. But if someone speaks up and says, "Hey, I have this. Can anyone relate?" You start hearing stuff and realizing you're not alone. I mean, this is a very common neurodivergence nowadays. It's nice to be able to talk more publicly about it. I know there's a lot of, stigma and scarcity around that too. And, I'm proud of anyone who's able to talk about it openly with
Mm.
others.
Yeah, definitely takes a little bit of courage, and If you're listening, you could be that person and make a difference for others, right? Like I think about like in the classroom, if you're a student or even those support groups you'll see, like the Facebook ones, everyone's scared to raise their hand. But as soon as someone raises their hand and asks it, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I wanted to ask it. They just were scared to raise their hand. So maybe be that person who can raise your hand and you never know, like, the be 100 more people with that same question, right?
I don't know if I had said this before, is that one thing I found fascinating, as I was always the kid that loved to sit in the front of the classroom, and throughout elementary, middle school, people usually argue for the front. But as you get into real world, like you go in anywhere, a packed room, you know where there's gonna be empty seats? In that
Right.
front row. And it's I never would have understood that as a kid, and it's so just realizing, wow, like, it really is that avoided, that the whole first row is empty. Even at weddings, I've seen it, the whole
Mhm.
first row empty. I was like, "What? That's."
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of insecurity I think we all have, right? To put ourselves out there and kind of goes with the theme, really be ourselves and be okay with it and advocate. What sort of support groups or spaces have you seen that have made a difference for family, whether it's you personally or if other families you worked with or talked to? Is there any support groups that you're like, hey, I really think this is beneficial or made a difference?
I think that there's a lot of more formalized structures now for support group networks. As I'm not fully involved with them, so I can't tweak too much on it, but I know, like, there's, like, the Family Inclusion Network, and you can get connected with places like that and then get community in that. Like, for example, in my personal experience is CARD, is you can get community through that. There's, like, local events you can go to, and the parents get resources too, and, you're a member of the community, and I think that's really important, is these are people that have came together and like, "All right, let's get something more structured so people that have no idea what they're doing can come to us," like the lighthouse. And so I think when you're looking to guidance, going to the lighthouse first is always a good first step.
Awesome. I like that, those some of those resources, and I think, it might be dependent on where you live, right? So Arizona, I could speak for just a few places like Autism Society of Greater Phoenix, I believe is what it's called, and then you got, like, Revved Up for Autism. There's so many different communities and groups, actually we live in a big city, so there's so many different groups, and, I think you made a point of just kinda indirectly saying, like, finding your niche, find what you like, some people like the Facebook, right? Some people like the one-on-one, some people like these big old groups, so I think is what, just probably finding your tribe that you resonate with?
Yeah, and more people are willing than meets the eye. Like, could be like, "Oh, this doesn't exist," but if you talk to people like, "Oh yeah, I wish that would have existed for a while now."
Mm,
And just really taking that initiative, which is it's getting tougher to take initiative in some ways, but easier in others. So I guess really finding where you fit in everything.
mm.
Like how I'm like taking initiative to make a support group to help other adults with neurodivergence be able to have a space to talk. Like that's something I was just proposing out to others to hopefully they can say yes. And I'm so happy for it. But it can happen.
And that's awesome you're doing that. So, yeah, I think it's, find your space, and if not, carve out a space, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I heard a saying that was great is if they don't make a seat at the table for you, pull up a chair.
I dig it. Or stand at the table if you got it, right?
Exactly.
Alright, so for parents who are nervous about joining a group or even sharing their story, what's something that you could say to them just to get them out of their shell?
Think about the people that are just like you and how you could help them. If that's something that would help you, then like use it. But, if it's not your time to speak, then that's okay too. Even maybe just finding someone that that's proud and speaks out about it. For me, when I spoke with a legislator and we had some people on, like, my side that were talking about this stuff, and he was like, "The way you spoke about it and how proud you were 'cause of your differences, it made me really think about the way I look at it
Mhm.
and how I really should treat this differently. And I should be proud that this culture, it is different.
That's really cool, Mandy, that he said that and that you made that difference. That's really awesome.
Yeah, me too. I'm thankful that, like we were talking about, is if it can reach one person, then that makes all the difference.
hmm I mean, if that one person, changes their life, then maybe they may change somebody else, and it's contagious, right? Positivity can be contagious.
Absolutely.
Back on this topic of support and whatnot, sometimes in small towns, you may not have as much support. So, any recommendations on how families could build their own mini support groups or networks, even if there aren't a lot of local options?
I would say to find those lighthouse beacons. For example, like I know I keep going back to them, but it's a great example for me is Card. Is they have like 6 or 7 different ones across the state, but they cover all the counties. So the rural county is covered by one of these. So going to that lighthouse beacon and then discussing what your local resources are and maybe new initiatives because they're thirsty for like knowledge. They want you to please tell us about let us know what you need in this area, and they really do try.
And for those who aren't familiar, give us a reminder what Lighthouse is.
Oh, so when I was talking about how organizations that have of passionate people that care about people with disabilities coming together and making a formalized place for people to flock to at like a lighthouse or like a moth to a flame. I was saying like that for Florida, we have this place called CARD, and it's called Center for Autism Related Disabilities. And so them hosting so many counties and having all these resources can start that conversation, and they can direct you to the next person and do that introduction so you're maybe not just cold emailing yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can just kind of speak from my little bit of experience of just like with between the podcast and just being out in community here and there is sometimes just having that first conversation with somebody is really powerful. Just learning about them and learning how much you have in common. And I'm actually impressed every time I talk to all you guys, like how much you guys are doing, whether it's you're advocating, someone might be writing a book, someone might have a product, scanning me home. Like it's just so cool to see what other people are doing. And if we kind of come together and work together, we can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole thing is everyone coming together versus, competing, you know. Like if I don't know if this is a common thing most people think, but I heard it was an interview with an autistic person and they said, I didn't realize all my coworkers looked at me as a competitor. I thought we were all on the same page and we're buddies trying to get up together. And I said that's a great way of how perspectives can be different.
hmm Yeah. All right. Last thing to finish off with. We've been talking about the parents. Parents are important, caregivers are important, but also the carry down from parents to the child. So this is an important skill to just build the connection and build community. How do we kind of pass that down to our kids and make sure our kids feel as supported and feel like they're included and inclusivity, all that stuff? How do we transfer that over to our kids and make sure that they feel connected?
So obviously, adjusting for every individualized kid, but trying to integrate as much as possible, going on the field trips and anything they can do out in public, like even homeschooled kids get together and have play dates and community events. And there's tons of free things you can do in the community with families. And it's really awesome. And a lot of people don't realize what's really out there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think the theme for today is that I've kind of got from this is really just not being scared to put yourself out there. Maybe just talking to one person, finding your tribe, and that can make a difference, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can be the one to break the cycle. And if not, that's perfectly okay. And, just advocating and being there is, more than enough.
Love this. All right. Thank you again for this conversation. It's been a pleasure, Mandy. And on our next episode, episode 4, we'll be talking more about autism when it comes to identity, pride, and advocacy. So we're just going to really talk about autism and give people more a breakdown of what it is, because not everyone really knows, and I don't think everyone ever is really going to truly know all the breakdowns, but it's so unique, right?
Exactly, especially as it keeps evolving and the definition isn't concrete, and we're arguing over what that definition is even right now.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive into that in the next one, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Awesome job, Mandy. Thank you to her for being on the show. Love all the insights and guidance that she provides us with. The things that stood out to me was to really just find your tribe and put yourself out there. If there isn't something for you, carve away, right? And even if you help one person, it makes all the difference. And your question may be something that someone else has. Another great interview. And that wraps up today's episode, but the conversation doesn't end there. If you got a story to tell, a question you love answered, or a topic you want me to cover, send me a message at Pure Hearts Therapy on our website, Instagram, Facebook, any of those. Go ahead and send that out. I really want this show to reflect what you need most as a parent or caregiver. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to follow, subscribe, and share with another parent who you think could use some encouragement this week. Thanks for being a part of the Pure Hearts Therapy family. Together, we're creating a world where every child feels understood. I'll see you next time.